Take three. Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brown, joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes. A few technical difficulties on the way in here, but nonetheless, we are reflecting on what was a magnificent weekend, a brilliant win for United against City. Of course, on this beautiful Monday morning, I'm still riding that high, Jamesy, from the weekend. So many things to be positive about, as we usually are on this podcast. So I have to bring you up to my level today, mate. So no dark cloud today. Delighted with the win. So much to be pleased about. I have to say, it's been a long time since I've seen a United that dominant. What was done to United, what was done to City is what City do to United. Normally,
Yep.
we're on the receiving end of that type of performance. And normally we're sitting there with nothing positive to grasp. Where honestly, it was a 5-0 win that was 2-0 win and drag. I mean, United completely dominated the game. It should have
Mm-hmm.
been much higher. And look, Dean, but I want to, before we get off the City, the topic of City, talk about the fact that Mason Mount goal, I'm still not satisfied with the explanations as to why it wasn't given. And you
Not
can't
at
be
all.
turning around and using certain metrics to justify Florian Wirtz's goal, but not. Anyway, we'll get to that. But nonetheless, how you feeling today, mate?
Yes, feeling great about it. And like you said, it was a categoric top to bottom dominance that we've not really seen in a long time from United. In fact, I mean, I would say years. We've won games over the last few years against some big teams. There was Anfield, but then you go, well, but they hit the posts 6 times, and it's like when you talk about the performance and the feeling from start to finish, it was probably the best performance against one of these big teams in following through a win that we've had in ages. And there wasn't any question, any doubt, any concern, any feeling that was a full, complete win. City had nothing for the game, literally nothing. It was like they had no idea what to do.
That's the perplexing thing about it is we were sitting here last week, totally dejected after Brighton.
Yeah.
I'd, all week I've been doing different radio segments and being asked about what to expect this weekend, last weekend with Carrick. And I wasn't sure because you just don't know.
Yeah.
I expected there'd be changes in the team, which there was. But one of the things that, for all Carrick's niceties, one of the things that was obvious from the very start is United were sent out with a bit of malice. Start going to tackle, show a bit of bait. You started to see City players getting hit early. You see Maguire with Bernardo Silva. You see different moments in that game.
Yeah.
I am thinking, okay, I remember this from Carrick before, instilling that into his team for all the, the plaudits that he gets for playing, football on the ground. He's saying it out there with a purpose. One or two players might have also went out there with some criticism in their ears from former legends. I'd certainly went out and proved the point.
Yeah, they definitely did, and you could see that. You're right about that. There was, it's always so hard to expect with this team, and you almost get tempted, which I don't want to do, to like pull things back and say, well, let's just see what happens next week before we get too excited, because we feel that way all the time. But there were things in this game, I think, to take away, to feel good about for longer, because again, it's not a smash and grab. It wasn't like a small lucky win versus this and that. There was so many things. And the interesting about this with Michael Carrick, and what's so kind of crazy, is that we have seen this before. When Carrick was in an interim, he did practically the same thing he just did in that City game, different circumstances and things, but a very similar thing. Michael Carrick's managed 4 games for United. He's won 3 of them against Pep Guardiola, Unai Emery, and Mikel Arteta, and has a draw against Thomas Tuchel. Those are the 4 managers that he has faced in 4 games as an interim coach or head coach or manager for United. And in every game, he's managed to set the team up in a way that has them play as good, if not better, than their opponent against top teams. And you just think there's something in this, where this guy just understands something that, I mean, the results on your microphone, the results kind of speak for themselves in that sense, that it is that effective. And I was just, it was mind blowing just seeing it go that way in this game so comprehensively, top to bottom.
If you remember when he was interim manager last time, he was the players' first choice, by the way, to take over. Players wanted Carrick to take over when Solskjaer took over the job. And what was interesting, James, is in his interim period, he left out Ronaldo and Bruno Fernandes in that game, in those game that period. And both of those players specifically came out and praised him. So he had their respect. What did you make of his lineup? Because he leaves out Cunha and Sesko.
And Mount, too. And it's sort of like you look at it and you go, and I think what it shows to some degree is, like, we've all had so much chatter about, well, lineups and defensive and picking players and things like that. And we kind of talked about this last week, how, like, so many things that, like, when you're losing, it's so easy to pick apart everything and say, well, that's the reason, and that's the reason, and that's the reason, and it's this, and it's like you went with it's too defensive of a lineup, and it's not in the DNA, and all of these kinds of things. But you look at that lineup and you go, well, on paper, that looked like one of the most defensive teams we would have played this season, one of the most defensive lineups we would have played this whole season. That's what it looked like. Dorgu's at left wing, and you've got you've got 3 players on the bench, 150 million from last window sitting on the bench. But it's about the, it's at the end of it, it's about intention. What did you try to do? What was the purpose? What was the goal? Is more important than all these little things. And it just kind of goes to show, that is the presiding factor of how you see the game. I thought it was interesting because, it was I think it was a clear plan in that sense. I don't think that's going to be that every single game. I think with Carrick, we'll see something a bit different every game.
Look, we've been here before, right? No one's getting carried away. We've all had this, moment where an interim manager's taken over, caretaker manager, whatever you want to call them, and we've had a complete contrast in the performance from what we had before to the previous manager to this one, and everything feels amazing. One of the things, Jim, when we talk about United's ex-players, United are a massive football club, and one of the negative dividends or negative consequences, I suppose, of having this glorious history is United's past keeps the future a prisoner.
Yeah.
And you have these players, ex-players, and it seems silly that someone like myself is criticizing them, because who am I to criticize Paul Scholes? Who am I to criticize Nicky Butt, Roy Keane? I can't. They know football on a level I will never know. But when you descend into personal, petty, childish insults, that he's going to lift Martinez, dominant. Nicky Butt was working at the club not so long ago.
Yeah, he knows him.
To me, that is unacceptable, James. And then you've got Roy Keane bringing in Michael Carrick's wife. Look, I know they had a little bit of a tiff 10 years ago, but Keane should know better. And when you are going after Lisandro Martinez that way, all it would have taken is a simple Google search, which is all it took for me to see that he hadn't scored in 5 of the 6 games he played against Martinez, 6 out of 7 now. We're talking about cup finals and stuff in that period. That to me is basic. And if I'm Paul Scholes, Nicky Butt, whatever, I'm coming out and apologizing, because that should be beneath them. And that's where it gets really difficult if you're a United manager, because there's so many ex-United players in the media. And we don't need another Bonlahor. I mean, the only thing that Gabby Bonlahor has a career in is trolling Man United. I don't know if he's ever said anything else. But imagine, I mean, to me, I don't see this. I don't see ex-Arsenal players on a podcast saying, that somebody's going to lift Mikel Arteta and throw him in or ex-Liverpool players saying that, about Liverpool players this
No.
to me, I understand there's reasons to criticize United, but that to me went way, way over the line.
Well, yeah, and it is very different. It's like if you and I sit here on a podcast and we'll say, okay, well, Diogo Diallo done this and that in the last week or something like that. For one, it's not personal. I don't know the person. We don't know him. It's not like that. We don't have that interaction. Two, it's intended to be talking about the game, the way that they play, the football on the pitch. But three, it's like, who the hell am I? You in comparison.
Our voice doesn't carry the same weight. Plus, we don't have the same responsibility. I'm not saying that exonerates anyone, but to me, when you want to, why did the class of '92 not get jobs at United?
Yeah,
there's a certain bitterness there, James.
There is.
To me, that is.
There is a responsibility. There is, there is that kind of responsibility of like it does matter. Like I think about every day. It's like Lisandro Martinez, these guys, they walk into Carrington, whose pictures are on the wall? It's these guys. It's these legends whose trophies are there, whose graphics, who are they looking at and looking up to every single day? And it's like, and then that guy's on a podcast or on a video or on something throwing personal attacks at you for no reason, not for any personal reason that they would have to dislike you, but just for whatever. And it feels low. It's like, how can, these are people you're wanting to carry, the legend forward of the club, you know what I mean? The story, the future of it and the past and the connection. And it's just so strange. It is really, really strange to see it. And they're not all like that, but you do see it with, for whatever reason, a lot of like the previous generation rather than a lot of the players who came through in the 2000s. Like you see Wayne Rooney talks very differently about the guys now. And when he speaks about United, it's very different to some of the guys from the early 90s. And I just think it is irresponsible because it has an effect. It has a serious effect. And they clearly bothers the players in that sense. And why do it? I mean, don't you want the club and the players to be successful? It actually does hurt.
Well, I mean, you can be precise with your criticism. If you have a criticism of a player that's football related, that
of course,
even if it's off the field, you can have certain criticisms of players if it's accurate. Yeah. But this is driving players out of the football club. I understand playing at United, it is enormous pressure.
Yeah.
And criticism comes with the territory. That's just the way it is. But I guarantee you, Paul Scholes nor Nicky Butt has been sitting particularly comfortable the last few days with all the directed criticism. They won't like that public criticism in the same way players won't like that public criticism because they're human beings. Just apologize. Just say, we all say stupid things. Well, you're going to put a camera in someone's face 24/7. I'm going to say things that I would wish I could take back that are not that are childish, stupid. We all do that. The world's forgiven if you come out and say, do you know what, that was unacceptable. I shouldn't have done that. I was wrong, and we can move on. And then, that to me shows integrity. But really disappointing to see that type of pointed criticism and brilliant response from Lisandro Martinez. Yep. One of the things that I also liked, James, was the way Michael Carrick explained the absence of people like Cunha and Sesko. Mm-hmm. It wasn't because it didn't like what he did in training. It wasn't because, he's naive in his movement. It was, look, there's games that we need this squad for. Sometimes we pick players for this game. And I thought that was what a top manager should do and how you explain absences of players that aren't in your team. I liked how he explained that away.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he's spoken well and said well, and I think it's where you get like a kind of advantage of with Michael Carrick as well, playing so recently I mean, he's played in a modern era. I mean, Carrick was still a player post Sir Alex Ferguson. He knows and he's seen and he's been through it. Michael Carrick's been around as a player or a coach for almost half the period post Sir Alex. So he kind of knows the atmosphere and the lay of the land of how things are right now. And he's a professional, Carrick is. He really does. He's a wonderful guy. And as a
I've
coach, it makes sense.
I've said a lot of stupid shit over 15 years on a podcast and on the media. One of the most embarrassing moments I've had doing this is I remember interviewing Martin Yall years ago, the ex-Spurs manager, and I remember saying to him, I don't understand why everyone rates Carrick so highly. He doesn't score goals, he doesn't create, he doesn't. And there's an audible big gasp for about 5 seconds, and he goes, I can't believe what I'm hearing. And just started turning to me, and I'm like, oh my God, you know, it's a seminal moment where I'm just totally embarrassed, going, shit, give me a back, right?
But to give you a little bit of defense there, Phil, I remember explicitly, because I've always been somebody who really, really liked Michael Carrick. I remember when Carrick was a player, there was a lot of people who didn't think he was that good at the time. And history lent itself kindly to Carrick over the years. And then people started, I think people came around, but you were not alone at some point in the past of thinking Carrick wasn't that good. There was a lot of people like that. I remember how surprising it was at the time to see like it being mixed, but I think most people came around in the end.
I think as we've gone forward in time and see some of the quality we've had to deal with in that position, you come to appreciate more. Well, he wasn't appreciated by England when he got 34 caps. He should have had much more, to be fair.
Yep.
His methods, though, do get the respect of a lot of players. As we were mentioning before, if you can leave Ronaldo out and get praised, you're doing something right. Same with Bruno Fernandes.
Yeah.
Inevitably, there's going to be similarities between what happened with Solskjaer and what have you. Look, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but just devil's advocate for a second. Let's say Carrick has a really strong run over the next 16 games. Gets United in the Champions League. James, first of all, picking a manager is not an exact science, right? Correct. You need a bit of luck. Ineos, if they got into the Champions League with Carrick, and there's a lot of fan equity with Carrick and what have you, they're going to need bollocks that you need that wheelbarrow to carry around to then make that change and bring somebody else in. Because if they go from a Carrick to a Ruben Amorim again, they're going to get slaughtered. And I empathize with them here in this situation because I think it's going to be very, very difficult because this would be the first major decision they got right. If Carrick brings them to the Champions League, I think it would be very difficult for Ineos to then turn around and let him go.
Yeah, I mean, I was. It's funny because I've been thinking about this a lot and going, well, he should be given consideration, right? Like you would weigh him absolutely up. Yeah, I mean, you would weigh up
and objectively.
Yeah, it's a little different to the Solskjaer thing. Like the parallels with the Solskjaer thing, I think, are that, number one, Solskjaer was not nearly as experienced in recent times, in the same way. I mean, Carrick's been coaching in England for the last 3 years. He had 5 years at United as a coach, or 4 years at United as a coach, right? So he is an experienced coach in England at United. He's done a lot, even if it's not been as manager. So you would want to weigh up his merits objectively against your alternative candidates, and then weigh up including as a part of that, what has he done with this team? But I also think about if Ineos and Wilcox and these guys are true to their words in terms of what they want from the club and how they want to set up the structures moving forward, that changing managers not just a disaster. Maybe they didn't get this all wrong. You know what I mean? In this sense, like if you can change midseason from Ruben Amorim to Michael Carrick and the rest of the season goes well, you have to put a little bit of credit and say, well, maybe it wasn't so bad. Maybe they did build a solid structural base where changing coaches midseason didn't like collapse the whole club. And that if you do have to switch coaches, everything's not going to start over and it's not going to fall to pieces instantly or something like that. But I think that has to also be considered at the end of the season, is that, where are we at and what are we trying to accomplish? Because it's easy to say, well, with Carrick, if you replace him and then things get worse, it's the wrong decision. But you could also keep Carrick and then, You try to take that, what happened with Solskjaer,
Yeah.
right? Is you kept him and then he went up, and then you tried to take that next step and it all came crashing down with him. And you go, well, it's hard to make the right decision. But I think if we're being realistic, I'm not saying Carrick is the boring choice, but it's sort of sometimes if it goes well, sometimes it's worth it to keep stability, because that's what we haven't had at United, right? Stability. Like, we all want to chase titles, but if we could have a stable base with Carrick where we can continue to fix the team, build the team, make something sustainable, even if you don't think he's the best manager on earth, but it's a stable, solid ground, why not? Stability would be good for the next 12, 14, 18 months even. And then you could revisit it again after that.
Look, as I said, I would empathize with, and I empathize with Woodward with the Solskjaer thing. There was things to Solskjaer's appointment, Solskjaer's, success, early success, that United were trying really hard to battle and create, and that was positive fan equity. That was the sentiment. That was a certain style of football where the pendulum started to swing in the opposite direction, where everything felt great. Look, I wanted Solskjaer at that moment, right? It was because of the contrast of what had gone before. United were playing exciting attacking football. They get into the Champions League. You love Ollie. And as I said, picking a manager is not an exact science. There's no process that will lead you to guaranteed success. It's risky. And, the Premier League is hard to get it right. I think when I look at the way United played against City, that wasn't just a new manager bounce. That was clearly instructional. There was clearly specific instructions within that game that were a result of Michael Carrick's instructions. And I know we're all going to do this. We've all asked, every one of us have asked this question to ourselves or the other people since the weekend. Would we have won that game if we had Ruben Amorim? It's not a helpful question. I think the answer is no.
Yeah.
Because there were certain things that were
not
present
like that.
in that game. Which is, I think, when United would have went 1-0 up, we just saw a really defensive substitution.
Correct. Big difference there. Yep.
Because there was no trust. But instead, United pushed for that second goal, got the second goal.
Yep.
There was never a moment in that game where I felt, oh shit. Every single time in every game I've watched under Amorim, Amorim's gone, but I'm just illustrating the contrast. I never felt the lead was secure.
Yeah.
No matter what the lead was.
You know what? I just want to mention on that really quickly that there are some really interesting parallels I found given the situation we're in with Michael Carrick, because of course Solskjaer, and Carrick was coaching at the time too, came in following Jose Mourinho, who has a lot of similarities to Ruben Amorim. And both of them did something really interesting sort of in the last bit of their time at United that I find really similar. And it's just maybe just a principle or school of thought on this that I find really interesting. And it never really clicked for me until yesterday, thinking about the game more and after watching it and looking at that exact thing you just pointed out. When you go up and with a lead, what happens, right? Jose Mourinho that summer before he left was desperate to get defenders, right? I think that was like the big fallout was he felt, I don't have a team that can defend. So Jose Mourinho's response to that was to set up his team to defend. When he didn't feel he had the players, he made his team really defensive. That was his response to it. Like, we can't defend, so I'm going to set up the team to be really defensive. I find Ruben Amorim to have sort of been doing the same. Are you there?
Oh, I lost you for a second. I made there's some latency on this. Go ahead, I got you back. Go ahead.
Yeah. I found that Ruben Amorim probably did the same thing when in the last month or so, when he feels, we can't defend, we're making mistakes. You start getting more and more defensive, focusing on the problem too much. You start to try to, and then it makes it worse sometimes, right? Like you focus on don't concede. So what do? You concede. And Michael Carrick made a really interesting comment, and that's what made me think of this. And he said that we're maybe focused on the things we can't do more than the things we can, right? And it's sort of like, as you get these managers, they start to deal with a problem and they hyper fixate on a problem and make it worse. in that sense by doing so. And Carrick comes in and it's fresh eyes, and it's a different school of thought, it seems, in the way that he thinks. And maybe this is, the Sir Alex influence, or just knowing how United have been in the past. Instead of focusing on, all right, we concede too many chances, let's focus on defend. What can we do well? We can press, we can attack, we could. And it was just a distinct difference in that intention. So when we went 1-0 up, we didn't try to hold. We went for it even more and pressed the advantage, and it worked even better than trying to defend the lead. And that's a difference in attitude that reflected on the pitch, I think.
By the way, Patrick Dorgu's son.
Oh boy.
Right? I mean, the player that I saw pre-Newcastle, was it?
Yeah.
When he was a player I was concerned about.
Yep.
A player that honestly looked a level or two below where you need to be at this football club. The confidence, the emergence. This is a guy that would have had the winner against Wolves at home. Brilliant goal against Newcastle. Vital goal against City. He got that goal, James, because he wanted that ball more than everyone else in the box.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And you're looking at a player going, I'm having to update my software here, because my appraisal of him is, whoa, obviously we have a player here. And I put a tweet out, I think it was probably about the start of December, where he said United have a Dorgu problem. Well, they've answered it, and he's answered it emphatically. That is a very, very impressive young player. And he's scoring important goals in key games, James, that makes me very excited. United need width in this team. I hope that this is the end of United's experimentation with three at the back and not playing with width. Kabi Mainu was exceptional on Saturday. Really encouraging performance. Bruno Fernandes was out of this world. Harry Maguire, exceptional. And I hope that this is United's flirtation with this is one of the things I really hope Ineos learn from the Emery, is that remember, Emery might be an exceptional coach. He's just not the right coach for Manchester United.
Right. And I would tend to agree. And it was like we kind of noted that at the end of it, I think there's a lot of good things that happen, but you pointed somebody with a very specialist way of wanting to do things, and you didn't have the team for it. Didn't work out. It would have, like he said himself, he learned it's going to cost way too much money, be way too difficult to build a Ruben Amorim team. And they all kind of said, well, is it even worth it by the end of it? And you've gone with something else. And in that sense, you can see, I think, that there's an obvious instant impact and value in saying, well, Carrick's somebody that probably with the team we have now, which we think is a lot better than it was 12 months ago, we could do something better. And there was a lot of really good performances, by nature of putting players in spots to be more comfortable for them and places where they can excel.
I think another part of this, James, is Carrick is managing for right now. He's not coming in there, we need to suffer for the next 6 months so I can implement my long-term plan. We're going to win. I'm going to use what I have right now to try to win the next football game. And I think that immediacy is something that's really, really important, because one of the things that you can't do, I remember we were talking about this at the very start, James, you can't implement your ideas effectively when you're losing games of football. Players just won't buy into it, right? Players are willing to sacrifice and do things they don't want to do if it's getting them, if there's a reward for it. But you can't get them to buy into your methods and ideas when you're losing games of football, because inevitably their confidence goes. And then you have a crescendo of ex-players now coming out and then into you. And so with Carrick, when I watched United on Saturday, I'm looking at this going, this is the way Manchester United have to play. Have to play with courage. At 1-0, if we concede a goal, going for the second, I would rather do that than concede a goal and to defend. 100%. Where you have some self-fulfilling prophecy, where you are almost speaking into existence, we're going to concede a
Yep.
stupid goal, because it's always like the 96th minute where
Yep.
you can tell it's all nerves.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you defend the lead, is you go on the attack.
Yep.
Let me ask you about the offside goals, James. I think you could say Ahmad's was offside.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The other two are highly debatable. The third one, the last goal, the Mason Mount goal, James, I read a stat, and I haven't verified this, that United and Brentford, I think it was, are joint for the most VAR errors this season. This is unacceptable. That goal turned out to be insignificant in the grander scheme of things, but that goal should have counted, James. And Anthony Taylor makes me nervous every time he referees United.
Yeah, I think so too, and I still have not been convinced by some of the later images that have been put out and things like that, because they don't really match what you saw on the screen. They look very different to it, and it was just, it's strange, and it's like you say, you see that under with Verts the following week, the prior week rather, you have this allowance, and you have this, like, there's a little bit of and it's like, why? It never feels the same. It never feels even. It never feels like there's the same standards for a game to game, in that sense. It's very frustrating.
This is where I can't accept the inconsistency. I can accept inconsistency when they're dubious, right? Because two human beings, okay, that's a 60-40, 50-50, fine. But when I see Kyle Walker stamp on Dorgu, it's impossible for any official to look at that and come up with any other conclusion that that's a red card. Now, you could argue Diogo Dalot could have got a red card. I don't think it was a red card. I think it was a heavy yellow. But I don't think it's a sending off. And there was also a handball that should have been given right before that, which would have meant
correct. It wouldn't have happened. Yeah.
And I'm looking at the same whenever Bruno gets his yellow card. How do they not see Kusanov's foul on Dorgu first, which is so blatant to me? But I'm looking at these things going, there's no excuse for this level of inconsistency when it comes to football. As we've said before, games play between, you can bend rules, not break them. Has to be that way. We can't give a free kick for every physical contact, or there'd be no football to watch. I understand that some of it's subjective, but stamping on someone is not subjective, it's objective. There's no other explanation. And I was watching Brahim Diaz's penalty the weekend for Morocco, and I'm thinking Bruno Fernandes is one as well, where you have the big delay in between, where referees getting in front of him and stuff. And then I see Florian Wirtz, and then I hear Arne Slot say something like, the referee should know it's Liverpool and we don't do that kind of thing. What? Right? It just is very, very frustrating, because, look, that goal was significant to Mason Mount. It's significant to United's goal difference. It's significant. 2-0, 3-0 is a different score, and it's emphatic. It would be much more reflective of how United played. The other thing is United kept a clean sheet, and comfortably kept a clean sheet.
Yeah, I mean, the chances that City had were practically zero. And I like stats more than you. I like underlying stats. I like things like XG and all of that. It was City's biggest XG defeat ever. But essentially what that means is it just tells a story of the dominance, that they had so few chances to none. Literally one save for Lamens to make, which was in almost off of an error from him, where he hit the ball out for a corner when he didn't actually have to touch it, and then it comes in on a header, and that was it. And there was nothing else to do. But it just demonstrates the level of how much United did versus how little City were able to produce in terms of threat on us. And look, you're right on that goal differential thing, because it matters a lot, these types of things as well, when you look at it. I mean, the table's going to be tight. This Champions League chase for position could end up being decided by something like goal difference at the end of it. It's like it's not outside the realm of possibility. You have it's 2 or 3 points between 4th and 11th, and United are on 6 goal difference, and Liverpool are on 4, and Brentford are on 5, and Newcastle are on 5, and they're only 2 points behind. That one extra goal difference, these things can make the difference between a position in the table that could mean Champions League or Europa League or something like that. And it's just frustrating in that sense. But, yes, as well, the clean sheet either way was exciting. I think we've said this in the reverse many times, where we felt like United could have played 180 minutes and they wouldn't have scored. I think we could have played 180 minutes and City wouldn't have scored. They were completely out of ideas. They had no idea what to do.
Trying really hard not to get carried away with Brian and Boomham. Trying really hard not go overboard. That goal was so reminiscent of United's goal against Liverpool. It was like the same goal all over again. And Bumo once again coming up big against City, scored away at Anfield, scoring important goals for United. I thought the way he was utilised without having Sesko was magnificent.
Mm-hmm.
What a bargain this guy's turned out to be, James. I'm really excited by the player that we have here.
I think he's the next Mo Salah in essence, in the way that he plays and the way that he runs and just how he does things. Some of these really fast, athletic, physical, left-footed players, just, I don't know what it is about this. Maybe it's just me. I know I've seen other people have this take, but I feel like left-footed players, when they're good, for some reason, they're much harder to deal with for defenders. They get angles and things that other people don't see and don't have. And I don't know what it is, if it's just people are used to the right-footedness of it and all of that. Yeah, but because you see it with Ahmad too at times, like he can be so confusing for defenders comparatively. And I look at Mbeumo and I think he is that good. The guy has the potential to be one of these guys who's like up front, out wide, doesn't matter. He's going to go get you 15, 20 plus goals. And I think he'll get there as United get better. I think he's going to do it for the next years. He just is that good. There's nothing in his game that says he won't be an incredible goal scorer, because it's big games, it's small games, it's wherever he shows up and does it. And he has everything that you need, honestly.
I think one of the things that impresses me, James, is the fact that he does deliver in big games.
Mm-hmm.
He's not stat padding, against Burnley. He's not banging a couple in against Wolves. If you look at the goals that he's scoring, they're key important goals. United are, the contrast between what we had last season is such an obviously, I wouldn't spring as much as I respect young Garnacho and stuff. I wouldn't want Garnacho back in exchange for Brian Mbeumo. Cunha has come in for some criticism recently. It was not a criticism personally that I shared. Came off the bench, was instrumental, of course, in Dorgu's goal. I think that it's going to be interesting to see how Carrick fits him into the team, because I don't think he's suited to playing as a winger the way he was with Fletcher, but nonetheless, he was like a winger getting that ball across for Dorgu. I think he's one of those players you just can't reduce him to how many goals he scores, because there's just so many other things to his game that are so important.
I agree with Cunha. He's not just like a forward that's going to go out, and he does a lot more. And it's hard to note sometimes without watching him, but he really does do a lot more. And I think one of the challenges that you do have with Cunha is he's a player that, with the same way as he played at Wolves, he needs and wants to have a lot of influence on the game beyond just, like you say, just being that. He's not just going to be an outlet ball or forward in that respect. He needs a lot of influence on the game. He's almost, I almost think of him in a comparison to what could be of a player like, how Joelinton was a forward and then was converted into a midfielder, because he plays in a similar way of kind of wanting to do everything. He'll be back defending in his own box in 1 second and then carrying you up the pitch. And he plays almost more like a box-to-box midfielder or an attacking midfielder who wants to get in and make those extra runs. He likes to be able to move around and across the pitch. He's not someone you want to segment to saying, well, just play on that wing, in your side. And he can be really influential in that respect. And I think to a degree, it'll be one of the challenges for all of them, because all three of the coaches who've coached games this season have ended up moving Cunha centrally. Like, he played at striker at times under Ruben Amorim. He played off onto the right and then in the center under Fletcher against Burnley. And then, under Carrick, he comes on again as a striker. And you think they all kind of see that he's not, you kind of have to fit him somewhere in the middle of your team to make him work and have him be effective. And it'll be one of the challenges, is how do you fit this all together? And, personally, I know right now, nobody wants to talk about this at the moment, understandably so, because it's just been a great game. But in the long haul, I've always seen it as, to a degree, part of your long-term view beyond Bruno Fernandes, whether that's now or later. Having somebody who needs and wants to be on the ball. They're not the same player, but I don't think there exists like a Bruno replacement out there. You're not going to find a Bruno to replace Bruno with when he leaves, be it this summer or next. We know it's coming at some point. It could be this summer. You kind of need players who want the ball, who are going to play in these kind of zones and be influential. And it's not a comment on quality or character or these types of things. It's just, I kind of see it as almost like long-term planning, that Cunha will have more of an effect even than the short term. And it's certainly a little bit of a puzzle for Carrick in the immediate.
I think one of, and we'll stop talking about Ruben Amorim, but one of the things that to me didn't reflect well on him was how well Kobbie Mainoo and Bruno Fernandes played in midfield, where I'm like, we were told this can't happen. It's either one or the other. If I'd have had a few performances out of United under Ruben Amorim that looked like that, I would have had a lot more patience. Kobbie Mainoo, bizarrely, James, one of the things I was thinking about when I was watching this game, this might be the best performance I've seen from United since the last time they beat City in the cup final, where Bruno Fernandes and Kobbie Mainoo were in. When Fernandes and Kobbie Mainoo were in the same team.
In a 4-4-2 as well, with it was in a similar shape and setup with Bruno up front. Yeah.
And to be fair to Amorim, he went to City and won, which almost nobody does, so we have to give him credit there. But also, one of the things that amused me quite a bit was how much City's youthful backline was used as mitigation for their defeat. Football club that has spent, 700 million in 2 years. When Lenny Yoro, Patrick Dorgu, and Aidan Heaven were in United's back four, or back five, whatever you want to call it, certainly wasn't considered mitigation, along with a 23-year-old goalkeeper who's making his debut season in the Premier League. But all of a sudden, it's mitigation for City. But I think looking at the commentary from a lot of neutrals, James, watching that game, there was a lot of neutrals reminiscing about this as the Manchester United of, look, we're not getting carried away. United have a very difficult game this weekend against Arsenal. We know that. And nobody has the confidence or the balls to say this is what's going to happen in the next game. United could go out and get murdered in the next game. But nonetheless, you can't not enjoy a win at home to City, complete derby dominance, because you might lose the next game. So I want to ask you about potential signings, because I saw Fabrizio Romano and a couple of other people say United are scheduled to meet with Carrick this week on potential new additions. People like Mark Casado has been mentioned from Barcelona. People like Ruben Neves. Do you know anything about this, Jamesy?
I would still be surprised if we got anybody in before the end of the window. In general, I think that I would just still be surprised on that front, because the message has been pretty clear from the club. And I saw Simon Stone as well, obviously, very directly connected to United is he at the BBC for a long time. Reiterate kind of this morning as well, the plan hasn't changed. If there's long-term targets that are available, they'll do it. If not, they won't. Ruben Neves has been kind of, I would suggest, maybe angling a little from his side for a move back to England all month. If you were going to do it, if he was a long-term target, you would have done it before. You would have been lining that up at the start of the window, not on the 19th. So the message is the same. I think the idea is the same. are there any long-term targets available? And again, I'm not saying necessarily I even agree with the strategy, because I think one player would make a big difference in addition to this team right now, just to help out.
What
But
are you talking about, midfielder?
yeah, I think so. I mean, I would almost argue one of the challenges we have now is when you switch it to Carrick and you're setting up the team a little differently. I'm not saying you don't need a midfielder as much, but I think you find it a little harder to get a player who can do the job better than your options, like on loan or in a short-term type of deal or something. I think you find it a little bit harder. Like who's going to put in a better performance? I think Casemiro's had a really hard time at times in Amram's 2. Big open spaces, covering a lot more ground, all of that. And you could say, well, yeah, you just get somebody younger in who can go play. Now that it's going to be a bit of a different setup, it's going to be smaller spaces for the rest of the season, a little slower, a little more pragmatic in that setup. Kabi Menu fits into the team now in the way that you want. You move Bruno back up front. I don't know that there are as many players now that I would say, yeah, they fit they would be an improvement in the short term on what we have. It's a little harder to look at it that way. I still think, sure, if you could have gone and gotten like a Carlos Baleba or an Anderson or a Wharton or one of these guys, then that would have made sense. There's someone that can come in and start. If I'm fine, it's a bit weird,
No,
but
I
I'm
agree with what
finding
you're
it
saying.
harder to think with it now that we've changed. Because previously I would have said you could have taken dozens of players. You just need somebody with more legs. Now I'm going, the needs are a little different at the moment, and I'm less sure of what you could get.
Well, especially whenever you can now find a midfield where Kabi Manu fits in there with Fernandez, and with Casemiro. United will need to obviously address the midfield in the summer.
Yeah.
And I think, look, if what the football club are trying to do is the football club sign players for the managers. So even if Michael Carrick's not the manager at the end of the season, the players that we bring in are players that. And look, I was watching Unai Emery over the weekend. Clearly, when he was saying that Villa aren't considered one of the favourites or for top 4, clearly this was a dig at the football club for not spending money. I understand that the managers want players all the time, but these are massive financial investments for a football club. And coming in and throwing the toys out of the pram because you're not getting a player, like, to me, I thought that as much as Emery's done a brilliant job at Villa, I think there needs to be some tempered expectation. Nobody can do what Chelsea does. Nobody can do what City do. Every other football club has to operate in a completely different way. I wouldn't want to be in Glasner's position in Crystal Palace, but again, what are they to do? Are they going to let Mark Guehi leave at the end of the season on a free? No, it would be insane. I mean, Palace aren't winning the league, and Glasner's already said he's leaving at the end of the season. So it is imperative that football clubs recruit with the manager's contribution, of course, with taking him into consideration. But ultimately, these are massive investments for a football club that if they go wrong, the manager doesn't pay, the next 10 installments of, millions and millions. So it is definitely something that I understand why football clubs take that complete autonomy away from a manager, and it's very important.
Look, like you say, that the club's going to be judged for it at the end of the season. If they pull this off, get into Champions League with Carrick, don't buy anybody, and you end up at the end of the season going, well, I'm glad we didn't get anybody, because now we don't have to figure out, like, we have more money available, we have more space in our team to get in top targets. We'll be thinking, wow, that was a masterstroke, and not panicking, that we would have seen in the past, making some silly buy, overpaying, you stuck with somebody for 3.5 years, it doesn't work out, you know what I mean? If it works. So they're going to be the ones judged on it either way at the end of the season. So it's if it works, James, not get anybody good. If it doesn't, then you're criticized.
I'm just going to say this right now, and I'm probably wrong. If Carrick gets United into the Champions League and United have an entertaining, similar second half of the season that they had under Solskjaer, I'm going to want him employed.
Me too. Me too.
And I could be completely wrong, and I may not.
Yeah.
People, oh, you don't learn from the Solskjaer. I get it, right? Nobody can predict the future, but if he does that and has United playing exciting, attacking football, to me, a bird in the hand worth two in the bush. We could get in some exceptional coach that completely changes everything, and it's always a square peg in a round hole. I would want Carrick to get the job.
Yeah, and I'm not in disagreement with you, and I don't think it's wrong. I think that what's important is there's the target of where we finish in the table, and then there's the nature of how as well, right? Because, I'm not downplaying the City game, but we had 30% possession. For that game, it was perfect. Yeah, 30%. It was that low. 30, I know, that's why, because it was such a good game.
Did they seriously only 30?
Yeah.
Wow.
30, like you wouldn't think it. Everybody's surprised by the number. Myself, so I remember looking at halftime, and we had like 28% possession at halftime, and I was like, "Nah, that's impossible." And then I rewatched it.
That game.
Yeah, I rewatched it a few times, and I was like, "Well, it kind of makes sense." There was like periods of 5 minutes where City are just like, just horseshoeing it around the middle of the pitch, and it's going nowhere, and they have no idea what to do, and United are just comfy at that point in time. And it was because as well, the possession United did have was so meaningful. It wasn't spray the ball up the pitch with one long ball, chase it, right? They were playing with it when they had it, and they built really solid, good attacks that were so effective. And we put the ball in the net 5 times, so it feels like we had a lot, right? And we hit the post twice. So, but yeah, it's 30% possession. So I look at that and I go, okay, we gotta wait a second here and say, amazing performance, wonderful game. The big test for is what can Carrick figure out is when we play Fulham at home in 2 weeks.
Yeah, of course.
Because we're going to need to have the ball in that game. We're going to need to be in control of that game in a different way. I'm not saying we weren't in control of City, but there's control with the ball and there's control without the ball. And we're going to need to control the game in a little bit of a different way. And there's a lot more Fulhams than there are Man Cities, right? How does the team get up for the small games? How do you, we can't be in a, that performance, 30% possession against City is acceptable because of the nature of it. It's not the same against Fulham. And I think that'll be where I look at it and go, well, can we turn a different type of game into a similarly exciting performance against a team like Fulham? And that tells me the answer.
If United had made this decision a month ago or 6 weeks ago, do you think United would have lost the Everton? Do you think they would have drawn at home to Wolves? Do you think they would have drawn again? I believe United would have won those games, or if not, they certainly would have been much more of an attacking threat. Because to me, when I don't think Michael Carrick takes Xerxes off. I don't think United have 9 players behind the ball against Wolves. I don't think United against Everton wouldn't have had 3 at the back and more or less negate your man advantage. I think it was the Everton game, James. I might be wrong, but or Bournemouth, I think it was. Bournemouth were attacking United down the middle, and it was such an obvious consequence of the system that United picked that was producing that weakness.
Yeah,
I look at Wolves, where to me that was the nail in the coffin for Amorim because of how negative he was. I don't think United lose those games. I mean, it's pointless speculation, but I believe they might not beat Fulham, but I believe the way Carrick will have United play will be the probability that they win would be much higher.
Yeah, look, I mean, we need to, it's hard to revisit and know, and that's why I kind of want to see, you know what I mean? Because it's like we won at Anfield away this year, this season we won at Anfield away for the first time in 10 years. There's been a couple of good things, but obviously, like you mentioned, a lot of those games were really bad. The question is, how do we show up in those games under Carrick? It's still a question we don't have the answer to, because we have seen in the past the small games, are the smaller games, the smaller sides are the ones where the team doesn't turn up, the game doesn't go the way we expect. I don't want to make assumptions yet. I have a feeling it'll be better. I do as well have a feeling from what I've seen that it'll be better. But I think, in speaking about the long term with Carrick, it's those, because we're going to face more after City and Arsenal. We're going to face more of those smaller sides than big teams. More games where we're expected to be the team in control. Those are the ones I think that are a bigger determining factor into it's hard to think. It's hard going this way because like you don't want to lose the small games, but like there are more of those. You do earn more points in those games because there's a lot more of them.
To be fair, James, that's not just an issue for United. That's an issue for lots of teams. When you play against, you look at Liverpool, Burnley at the weekend, right?
Yeah.
Draw 1 each. You're playing against teams that are well organized. They know how to defend. They're not. You look at Wolves, Newcastle at the weekend. Wolves keep a clean sheet. It's not Football Manager. It's hard to break these teams down. They're very, very good when they get players behind the ball. So United have the individual quality to break those teams down, to score goals that are not a result of of a system. It's very hard to do. Obviously, when you're defending, if the onus is on you to attack, the defense is always reacting to what the attack is doing.
Yeah.
They're always a step behind. So, but it's much easier to defend than it is to attack. I think if you need to get pace in their attack and variation in their attack, I mean, this is the most confident United will be going to Arsenal than what they've been in a long time.
Yep.
If you'd have asked me about this a week ago, Liverpool Arsenal looked, City Arsenal looked awful. Now I'm going into that Arsenal game going, I bet you Arsenal are nervous about what United are going to show up.
I'm kind of expecting them to give us the ball. They've done that a couple of times in recent years where they've said, like you think about the home game opening day, they kind of just let us have it and said, we don't think you can score in that game. And they won off a set piece, which is what they tend to do. And that's why I'm really curious about the Arsenal game, because I think we might see a game where it's not like City where they want to have 70% of the ball. I think Arsenal might be like happy to let us have it, because Arteta's a bit more pragmatic in that sense, and he'll be saying, well, we're gonna nullify your pace and we're gonna sit a bit deeper and we're gonna put more, because they did it to us at home at the start of the season.
Take a look at the last number of times United have played Arsenal at the Emirates, the games they've lost. It's all set pieces.
Yeah, all of them.
Go back to the one that Ten Hag never stopped talking about, right? Was it 2 corners? That game, right? So,
it's set pieces.
The one at Old Trafford that Bayern threw into the net, right? Yep. It's not like Arsenal are dominating these games. United went during the FA Cup last season, won that game.
Yeah, with 10 men and made it to penalties.
Yeah, I'm looking at that game. Maybe it's foolish, but a different level of confidence than what it was looking
I think we're going to win, I'll be honest. I got this feeling like around Thursday last week that we were going to beat City, and I couldn't quite place it. But I don't know. I think we could win against Arsenal.
If you need to go to Arsenal and win, we all do this, right? We get carried away when we lose, get carried away when we win. The media narrative, everyone's going to get, and rightly so. Go ahead, get carried away. Why not enjoy the wins? If you need to go there and win against Arsenal, maybe getting a wee bit carried away myself. I would be absolutely. It just is. Football is mad. It's unthinkable. That this is where United are at. Do you think about this a week ago? Arsenal fans obviously don't listen to this, but Arsenal have never had an invincible aura to me. There were times
so not convincing to me. They just aren't.
I mean, they were exceptional late 90s, early 2000s, no question. But the aura that City have had or Liverpool have had at their peak, man, I dreaded some of those games.
Different. Yep.
So many times I dreaded going to the 2 games that I dreaded the most were Anfield and the Etihad, because you knew this is going to be an unload vibrator, right? This is going to be terrible. I never ever had that feeling at Arsenal. I never felt shit, it's Arsenal. Even when they were going for the league titles and stuff, even in this current period, but they just have never had that aura to me. And I always have some sense of expectation, even when United are at their very lowest in an Arsenal game where they can get something. And I don't know. I'm not dreading this game, so I know we'll have Mazraoui back as well.
Yeah.
For that game. The other benefit of going to a back four, of course, is United were able to rest young Euro, which I think he badly needed.
Yep.
Anything else before we go, matey?
I think that's it.
All right, folks, we'll be back again. If there's something to do, then we'll do another podcast maybe later on in the week. Otherwise, we'll be back next week. Don't forget, check out my man here. If you're listening on the BTP side, this guy's recording content every single day. Some fantastic other podcasts he's doing with other United media commentators, other people that is really worth checking out. Thanks to all of you who download our podcast and subscribe. It's much appreciated. Apologies for some of the internet latency a little bit earlier in this podcast, but out of my control. Jamesy, all the best, mate.
Yes, sir. Thank you all. See ya.
Cheers, guys.